Okay, so now when we look at this next scenario, the first thing I want you to notice is the way these things are organized on the right-hand side. So this has been done, again, visually to help you understand what's going on in Java. And this is something we're going to talk about for the rest of the course as well. But the way that we read this relationship is we use the is relationship. And what that means is an explosion is an actor. You see how the explosion has an arrow that connects it back to actor? So everything that an actor can do, an explosion can also do. Like the analogy I used last day when I said, you know, you are an animal. Everything an animal would have as an attribute belongs to you as well. It can also happen on multiple levels, like here, where we have a class called bullet. The bullet is something that moves, so it belongs to a class called mover. And the mover is also an actor. So this, again, is specializing, like, you know, if it was animal, canine, and then maybe it's like a terrier or a poodle or some special dog, right? So more specialized you get, ends up landing you on something that's actually something you can create, like a bullet, a rocket, or an asteroid. So all I'm going to ask that you do right now is I'll just give you a minute to play in this scenario. So if you remember from last day what you do, you can right-click on your rocket here, and you can add new rockets to the world, all of that sort of stuff. You probably just want to stick with one rocket and stick in a few asteroids, but just get a sense for what the game does, and then we're going to talk about how to tweak it. So first of all, full disclosure, I'm probably the worst video game player in the history of video games. So yes, I'm terrible at these sort of things. But if I stick a few things in this game, whoa, yeah, see I'm horrible here. And come on, there we go. We want to be able to change some of those behaviors. So the first thing, anybody notice something maybe possibly annoying about the way this game plays? Well, one thing that's way too slow is the way the gun fires. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and peek at some source code and take a look at how we can manipulate it in a few different ways. So the first thing we should always do is see what's available. So let's right-click on the rocket. And there's a method there called setGunReloadTime. So if I click on that, it's waiting for me, it's asking for, and if you remember, what is it I'm asking for right now here? What kind of data is it expecting? An integer, right. So in Java, that word int means integer. If I try to do something like this, 3.5, then, well, let's see what Java says about 3.5, because that's not an integer. It says, error, possible loss of precision, required an integer but found a double. So it's basically being polite, telling me that I've made a mistake. So if I set the reload time to 3, it says the standard is 20. So now I should be able to shoot faster than I did before. So that's one thing we could change here. So, not that it makes me any better at playing this game, but it's certainly easier to hit the asteroids now that I can shoot much quicker. Okay? So now we're going to actually go and take a look at where the rocket is built. So do you remember in Java what it's called when you build something? There's a lot of terminology, and that's about the only thing I asked us to think about yesterday was getting the hang around the words we're going to use. So do you remember what it's called when you build something in Java? Starts with a C. Yeah, that's right. It's a constructor. Good for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and take a look at the code there. So what I want you to do is go down to where it says Open Editor. And now it's actually showing us source code for the rocket class. So right now, all I want to say to you is don't let it bother you right now what you're looking at. I mean, obviously, we haven't talked about source code. This is the first time we've brought it up in class. But does anybody think they might be able to look at, here this is called the constructor. And how do I know that it's the constructor? Do you remember what I told you about how you know it's a constructor? It's something to do with the way it's named. How do you know that this must be the constructor I'm looking at when I'm looking at the code? Yeah, go for it. Yeah, that's how you know, because this is saying, I will tell you how rockets are created in Java, and it says this is how you build a rocket. So when it has the same name as the class, that's where they're built. So in this method, where do you think we could fix that gun being slow? How do you think we could fix that? Do you think you can do it here before it even gets itself placed into the space world? What do you think you would do? Does any of this code here look like it might be useful for you to change? Great. So gun reload time, that 20 up there. We should change this here. If we wanted to make it something like 5, the reload time is faster now because I'm allowing the gun to reload in only 5 instead of 20. So it reloads quicker. So this is where the reload happens. And I'll just say one thing to you right now, and this is a good point going forward. Java doesn't care what you call things. So it doesn't matter. We could call this something enormously, abstract and bizarre, and your code will still compile. But the problem is, nobody in the world would know what you were talking about without great detail of explanations, and it would be very confusing to read that code. So because you have this luxury of choosing any name that you want, we try to choose names that make sense. So this is called a variable, and we pick names which are easy for us to read. Something that it sounds like in English. So gun reload time makes sense to us. Okay, so let's compile it. And then we'll take a look now at what happens when I put a rocket in the world. And just because I'm horrible at this, I'm not going to put any asteroids in yet. So let's put this here. Now, right from the beginning, I don't have to call that method. I can do that fast firing right when it's built. Okay? So that's our first peek at changing some of the code around. We'll do a little bit more later, but I have a few questions that I'd like you to play with in this scenario. So the first thing I'd like you to do is think about, can you make a very large asteroid? Could you put an asteroid in there which is not the standard size? So, for example, if I am going to put this in here, that's what I get. Can you find out? How would you make one which is larger than that? All right, so some of you have this large asteroid. How did you do it? How'd you do it? What's the trick to getting a bigger asteroid? Okay, so there's a method in here that says set size. So in here, what did you change it to? 100? Wow, okay. So let's see. Yeah, looks good to me. So that's still probably reasonable. If you put like 1,000,000 in there, it might be difficult to beat this asteroid. Has anybody noticed what happens when you start shooting that asteroid? What's going to happen to it? It splits? Yeah, eventually it breaks down. How many times do you have to shoot it before it breaks down? So just to help out, since apparently I'm not the only one who's having trouble with video games, but I'll make it easy to count. So I'm going to put it real close. That's 1. Then I'll try it again. 2. And this isn't cheating, is it? Okay, here's the... Oops, did I miss it? Okay. As I mentioned, my skills here are quite shockingly bad. Does anybody have the from their own code? Because I think I'm on 4 now. Let's see. 5. And I'll see if I can... So what was that, 6? Don't know. Maybe we better do it again then. Let's grab an asteroid. What did you get when it split? 3? That sounds reasonable. 3 was at, let's have a look. Okay, so I'm going to run it. And let's see here. 1. Oh, of course you have to stay alive in order for it to work, right? Two. And 3. All right. So, see, I wasn't kidding when I said I'm the world's worst video game player. So 3. So what do you think, how do you think we could track that down in this asteroid class? Like if we look at these asteroids, what do you think there might tell us a little something about how the programmer put that behavior in there? Get stability? Let's have a look. So if we ask for get stability, it's going to say the stability of the asteroid is 32 in this case. And 64 here. So let's see what that programmer left us a clue about here with the stability. So it says if it goes down to 0, it breaks up. And when we right click on it, if we hit the asteroid, do you see what it's asking for as a parameter? So when a bullet hits the asteroid, it's going to inflict some damage. So if it takes 3 times to get down, let's just see if we can figure out here how much damage it's going to have. Okay, so in this bullet, the bullet is what hits that asteroid. It says here, and again, today's not a day when we're going to learn lots of Java, but here's where it says, get me an asteroid, and I would like it to be hit with this much damage. So if we want to track down, the programmer here has told us this is how much damage a bullet does. So one nice thing that's flexible is you could add different weapons with different amounts of damage. Okay. So in here, every time it gets hit, it's going to subtract that amount of damage, which is why it explodes after it's been hit. All right, so once it gets smaller, how many hits is it going to take here? This smaller one is now 32. So what do you think is going to happen when it tries to, you try and shoot the smaller asteroid? How many is it going to take this time? Yeah, just twice. If it inflicts a damage of 16, we should be able to see it disappear after 2. So the good news is eventually those asteroids will disappear from the game because it'll split down to the point where it can't be brought back into the game. Okay, so what I'm going to ask that you do then as your programming challenge for the day, I'm going to get you started, but what we're going to do is we're going to get the video game to run right from the start. So what your job is going to be is to add some things to your game and to give them the properties which you think make the game play well. So what I mean is the stability of your asteroids, the size of your asteroids, the speed of your gun, all the different features that you want to add, they need to be programmed in so that when I click on this button here and say compile, your game is ready to play right, well, with a faster computer now. Right now I can't play this game because nothing shows up on the screen. So I have to do all this stuff manually, like say, give me a rocket and an asteroid and things like, why don't I set its size to be 200? And after all this, now I'm ready to say, okay, it's time to play my game. So what I want you to try and do is make this happen right when the game starts. So right when the game starts, let's see if we can use the right Java lingo to track down what we're doing. When the game is being built, what is that we're looking for in Java then? When Java builds things, what's it called? Good. So we need to go to the constructor of when our game is built, and it's built in space. So we're all going to go and open up this editor and look for when the space is being built. So here is the space being built, and we're not going to change the code that's already there because it is what we want it to do so far. All we're going to do is add our own features. So I'm going to give you the first hint. The rest of it's up to you. I would like you to put as many features as you feel like would make a good game here, but it's our first shot at coding, so here's what it's going to look like to get you started. I'm going to create a rocket, and I'm going to call this my player, and they are a new rocket. Now notice this is exactly the same thing that we did when we did it visually. See, instead of typing in the code, I went here and said I would like a new rocket. Okay? So I'm going to take my new rocket, and what was the next thing that I had to do after I right-clicked new rocket? Do you remember what the next thing you have to do is? You have to click in the world and bring it over into the world. So instead of clicking in the world, this is how you add it to the world. You say add object, and what do I want to add? I want to add this rocket. There's a problem with this. We're so close, but we're not quite there. What do you think is the problem with just saying, throw this rocket into the world? Yeah.
Don't know where exactly.
Awesome. The one thing you got to keep in mind is that computers are like the definition of stupid. They know absolutely nothing until you tell them. So, not to insult the computer, I mean, it does very wonderful things, but only once it's told what those wonderful things are. So you can't just say add a rocket because the computer's not smart enough to know where it's supposed to go. So that's what we have to add to it. Do you remember how we find out? How do we find out what this add object does? It's the documentation. So if you open up your documentation and you say, geez, I can't remember how to add an object, let's go have a look. Here it is. Adding an actor to the world. If I click on it, it says, tell me what you want and where you want it. And here's the different description of what we're doing. So this is the other hint to you. When you start setting up this video game and changing properties around, this is one place you can look to find out what's available to you. So let's go in here now, and I'm going to say add this player. I'm going to add it to 300, 200. Does anybody want to take a wager where the rocket's going to show up? Ooh, no thank you. Anyone want to take a wager where that rocket's going to show up? Just think about it. I'm going to run this and you'll find out. Now when I build that space, here's where my video game starts its life. I now have my game. And look, I don't have to add the rocket because I told Java how to do that before the game runs. So it's right in the dead center of the screen. Have a look at this code where the space is being built and think about it. How did I know that 300, 200 was where the middle of the screen was going to be? I know it's early, right? It's not fair to ask the teenage brain to put in this kind of critical depth of thought. But yes, how do you think it might have happened that I knew?
Because those dimensions are half of the x and y of the screen.
Yeah, so this is up here. This is telling Java how big space is. So it says it's 600 by 400, and each one is a single pixel. So we can keep talking details, but that's how I knew. And one thing that good programmers do is they avoid these things, which I call them magic numbers. It's out there in quite a few different textbooks in that. And what we mean by a magic number is I can break your program if I change one thing. So if I go up here, now it's no longer the middle of your screen. All I did was change one thing. Now your program doesn't work the way you intended it to. That's not very versatile. So how do I fix that? Thank you, Windows, for trying to help. How do I fix that? Well, I can ask, what is the width of this world, and divide it by 2. What is the height of this world, and divide it by 2. So the only difference, the rocket still shows up in the middle, but the only difference is now you can't break my code. If you change this, let's just say that I made the space 1,000. Instead of having to then go and edit all of my code, it's going to automatically change itself by saying, get the width of this world and divide it by 2. Okay? So 2 things I'd like you to think about when you create this game for me. Your goal is to create your own Space Invaders game, the Asteroids game. That's it. Under that goal, what I would like you to do for me, initialize all the objects, get everything in there so that when you hit compile, we can start playing your game right away. You should be thinking about not hard coding things where you can. So for now, that's not a requirement. But if you are running into sticking magic numbers in your code, please ask me and I'll show you some alternatives to avoiding it. Okay, right now I'm happy to give you those answers, but it's a habit of mine that we're going to use the rest of the course. Okay, so build yourself an Asteroids game, add your objects, set the properties of your objects, and make your game happen right from compile.